Hello. Today I thought I'd talk to you a little bit about the exhibition that I did in a mortuary chapel some years ago. Now that might not sound very nice, doing an exhibition in a mortuary chapel, but it's actually a lovely place. It belonged to St Saviour's Church, and obviously it's decommissioned, it's no longer used as a mortuary chapel. It's very pretty there. It's a building that's over 100 years old, and it's set in a very old cemetery. And it's on the side of a hill, and the hill slopes down towards the river, and all around you is greenery and shrubs and trees, and it's a very tranquil, quiet place. And the first time I did an exhibition in this little gallery, this chapel gallery, was in October. And if you're in the UK, then you know that in October it gets dark quite early, around about 4 o'clock. So I had the exhibition on open from about 10 o'clock, so by about 4 most of the people that were going to visit had already been and gone, but I would usually stay open till about 5:30 to catch the odd straggler that would be going home from the city from work. And so I'd spent quite a bit of time on my own towards the end of the day in the chapel, and what I would normally do is sketch. So I'd either sketch what I could see out of the window, or I'd sketch something from my imagination, which is what I usually do. And one particular day, it had been raining, so it had been very quiet in the gallery. It was towards the end of the exhibition, which usually ran for about 6 days. And most of the people, I believe, that were going to come in had already come in, so it was getting quiet towards the end of that week. And this particular day, I felt a presence in the gallery, very calm, very tranquil, as it always is in that gallery, but this was slightly different. And I started drawing from my imagination, and what came out of that particular time was a figure, a winged figure. Now I'm hesitant to say angel, but I think probably that's what I was drawing. And as I've said to you before, I draw from my imagination. And after the exhibition, as the days went on, I started to draw more and more of these figures, and they started to crop up, not just in my drawings, but also in my textiles. And that's been something that I've done ever since. So I've got a couple here to show you. In fact, most of the paintings and drawings that I did after that exhibition and the subsequent exhibitions I did after that have sold, but these two I kept. Now I painted these on Bockingford watercolour paper. It's a slightly textured paper. You can probably see some of the little bumps in paper, and using watercolour on this paper is lovely because it pulls and seems to have almost like a mind of its own. It goes its own way. And I used some paint that is quite granular, so that adds another added texture to it. In this particular painting, and I always think this is a male winged figure, or a male angel if you like, I've actually used some gouache as well and some inks. And I thought today I would attempt to draw another painting, or maybe even painting, using the technique that I spoke about in one of my other videos about how to draw from your imagination. A friend of mine actually mentioned something that seems quite interesting. Almost all of these sort of angelic influenced angels or winged beings face forward, and she said that it seems that many of the icons, the religious icons that you see, also face forwards. Now I'm not particularly religious, I don't go to church, but there was something in that presence in the chapel that day that sparked these particular imagery. So I thought I'd try today to paint and draw from my imagination using the technique that I usually do. So I usually begin by just moving the pencil over the paper with no particular aim in mind, although I know I'm going to draw, in this case, I know I'm going to draw a figure. So I'm just going to now sort of try and allow my imagination give me something. And you never know what you're going to come up with when you start drawing and painting in this way. Sometimes they can be quite rough, sometimes they can be quite not what you would plan to draw or paint. And it's important to be as loose as you can be when drawing and painting in this way, but also realizing that you have to keep some control in order for the imagery to make sense, if you will. So now, as you can probably see, I've got the outline of a figure, and to me this looks masculine. Now, I've no idea, I had no intention of drawing a masculine figure, but this is what has come out of this particular drawing session. And while I'm drawing, although I'm talking to you, I'm also keeping my senses sharp in order to try and feel where I want the pencil, where the pencil wants me to go. Now, that to me is quite a clear masculine energy. So I'm going to now use the pencil in a more determined way and try and map out this image of this particular using stronger strokes and more pressure on the paper. Now I think the drawing stage is over, and I think it's time now to add some paint to the image. So I've set up my paints here, and what I try to do when I'm doing one of these intuitive paintings is not to fuss too much about what paints I use. So I'm not going to be mixing any paints. I'm going to use them straight from the palettes, straight from the half pans as they are, so that I don't have to make conscious decisions about mixing paint. I'm just going to use as intuitively as possible. I'm just going to use the paint as I reach for it, so to speak. So I'm just now putting some water down first, and this helps with this particular paper. This helps the paint to move and almost like having a movement of its own, a mind of its own. So I'm just filling in some areas where I would like the paint to have that sense of movement. And if you can see just where I've wet the paper slightly. So I'm going to take some darker colours first. Sorry, some lighter colours first, and just dip that into this paint, almost like neutral colours first, so we get some colour going, some colour down. And allowing the paint to just move roughly where it wants to go. Keeping the paint quite liquid really helps with this kind of technique. And while it's still wet, I'm going to start dropping in some darker colours to see how the paint will move into that pooled area. I'm keeping the paint quite fluid, and I'm concentrating mostly on the figure itself. I don't really want to start at this stage. I don't really want to start being too concerned about the background. So I've dropped some darker paint now into the eye area, and it's important to try and keep some control over this as you get into it, because this is when you find these what they call happy accidents happening, where the paint will pool, and you'll find that you'll get these little puddles of paint that will create quite a lovely texture within the painting. You can see in this eye here, where the paint has reached a dry patch in the eye, it's made this lovely line. Now I don't think I'm going to be able to achieve that on this eye, because the eye is too wet around that area, but I'm going to attempt to just gently tap some more paint into that eye area and encourage the shaping of the eyebrows and the eye. Now I think at this stage it would be a mistake to carry on adding too much wet paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my little hairdryer and dry the paint that I've put down so far, so that we can then add some on the top. So just a little bit around the mouth, that's far too dark. A little bit of paint around the mouth. And now I'm going to use the hairdryer to just dry that off. Now, as you probably know, as paint dries it gets lighter. So now I'm going to just carry on. I'm going to attempt to darken the inner eye now, while the paper is still dry, and then highlight some of the areas around the eye. So painting in this way, with this in this intuitive way, is always a kind of a play-off between what your intuition tells you to do and what you know is good practice to bring about an image that makes sense, if you see what I mean. I will show you some. I'll take you on a visit to the chapel at the end of this video. I've taken some footage. I went there the other day, and there was actually an exhibition on or they were preparing to put an exhibition on while I was there. So you'll see what the place is like. Now again, I'm just going to add some thicker areas of colour. Take some of that colour back. And let that dry again. And quite often when I'm doing one of these paintings, I will use some ink and allow the ink to run where it will. Again, always using control, but using your intuition and allowing the paint to just do what it wants to do. So I'm going to attempt that now around the eye area. Just lightly put in some lines to define the eye. Which I'm hoping, once I've added some water and a little bit more pigment, you'll get a stronger sense of this intuitive character. And sometimes when I'm painting like this, I get a sense of who this is. You get a sense of a person and a personality. And I must say, the personality that I'm sensing with this is something like a Byron, a poet. That's how he seems to me. And sometimes I like the painting to remain just as it is now, delicate, not too overworked. With a minimum of added detail, so that the personality of the painting can come through without my having to add too much to it. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. So as I said, if you feel that this is something you'd like to attempt, it's not that difficult to do actually. You just let your imagination guide you. You might want to start, I mean, when I first started doing these kind of drawings and paintings, I would work on a bigger scale, and I would literally just get a pencil and just work into the paper until something seemed to emerge from the paper itself. So I'm going to show you now a visit that I took to the chapel. So I hope you enjoyed watching this.
Well done. We won't stay here for ages. But, and you have a look.